On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1967. We're going to be taking a look at Otis Redding, and he's going to be performing I've Been Loving You Too Long. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So this performance is just under 3.5 minutes in length, so we're going to watch it the whole way through and then we'll get into the analysis afterwards. So let's get Otis on screen and see how he gets on.
I've been loving you too long to stop now. You were tired and you want to be free. My love is growing stronger as you become a habit to me. I've been loving you oh too long, and I don't want to stop now. Oh. Can you do that one more time? Yeah, just like do it just one more time. One more. With you, my life has been so wonderful. I can't stop now. You were tired, and your love is growing cold. My love is growing stronger as our affair grows old. Ooh, I'm loving you oh too long, and I don't want to stop now. No, no, no. I've been loving you just a little bit too long, and I don't want to stop now. No, 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 and don't make me stop now. Oh, have mercy. No, baby, I'm down on my knees. Please don't make me stop now, yeah. I love you, I love you, I love you with all my heart, and I can't stop now. Please, 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 yeah. Don't make me stop now, yeah, yeah, yeah. I love you with all my soul, I love you, I love you. Good God Almighty, I love you, baby. I love you, honey. Good God Almighty, good God Almighty, I love.
And there we have it. This live performance is so full of emotion and expression from Otis, but also the arrangement that we've got here means that his voice can just take center stage. And when we talk about his voice, a technique that I do mention all the time on this channel is vibrato, and it's something that Otis doesn't have a great deal of in his voice. If it is in there, it's really subtle. His vocal was all about expression and tone and feeling and soul, and it wasn't particularly about any one technique being concentrated on or taking a vocal always down the same avenue. It was very much about the lyrical content and the way that he delivered it. For the most part, we've got just Otis's voice, the bass, and a very clean guitar that's just being picked through. And we also have, when the dynamic changes, the whole band start to come in. We have an organ in there. We've got the horn section. The bass is playing with the guitar during the verses as well. But it means that that dynamic can totally change. Something that I want to draw your attention to and really puts a spotlight and highlights the fact that this is totally live back in the era where it was. You just went and saw a live band and they changed things on the fly. Great example here with Otis, about 1 minute into the performance, where you have these stabs from the band and it's on the chord of E major, just coming in, and it's so dramatic, that change in dynamic. But Otis says, let's do it one more time, and then do it again. And you can hear the crowd starting to get more into it because of Otis's showmanship, but also just the enjoyment of the music, because he likes that change and he just keeps wanting to hear it. And we hear it 4 times in all, but then we're back down to just the guitar, the bass, and Otis's voice for the next verse. So we get such a dramatic change dynamically. You can't help but think that with a more modern day performance that might be performed to a backing track, this is the kind of stuff you miss out on, because if the artist is feeling a particular part of a song and they want to repeat it again, the backing track isn't going to be able to do that. They're going to have to just keep on going with the song. And it does limit the creativity live of an artist or a band when they do play to a backing track. So for me, it's all about playing live with a band and just going where the music takes you, because you'll often find with the great bands, that can be a different journey every night of a tour. They might take a particular song down a different avenue and it might last 6 or 7 or 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It doesn't matter. It's all about the inspiration that they're feeling at that moment, and that's why a live performance is unique. I think the crowd also are so much more likely to get into a performance when they can see that the performer on stage is getting into it themselves and they are giving absolutely everything on stage. And that is the impression you get from Otis in this performance. But just as an all-round performer, he would just leave it all on stage. And when he is singing, he looks emotionally animated and he really does portray those emotions through his voice. Just focusing on that voice again, because when I say about him not having that vibrato in his voice, it's going to make it a little bit more relatable, because sometimes with too much vibrato, you can lose that connection with the singer, because we don't talk in vibrato. We don't say, hello, my name is... like that. We just talk with a straight tone. So when you get a great singer with great expression in their voice, they don't necessarily need vibrato in order to convey emotions. He conveys those emotions in his chest voice the whole time and goes to a lighter configuration in the verses, because we do have that octave change in range, something that I mentioned about the best singers of all time have had that ability to go from the octave below in the verses to an octave higher in the chorus, and we have that, an A4. Like I said, we do have a key change here as well, and that was about 2 minutes and 13 in this performance, so look out for that, because that means that the end high note is now going to be an A sharp 4, so just 1 note higher, again making a journey out of the composition and the performance. Something else that you'll notice is that when Otis is singing the phrase "you were tired," he starts ever so slightly flat and then gradually increases that pitch to then be bang on, but he's making a journey out of just 1 word and 1 note. And it's interesting because the second time he does exactly the same thing, and it's just ever so slightly off, but he then gets to the note. He just tweaks it. So it means that he's taking you on a journey with his pitch, rather than just hitting it bang between the eyes the whole time. And this is the thing about auto-tune that I always say, that a singer will always hit the note immediately, or maybe 0.1 of a millisecond after the whole auto-tune processing effect kicks in, and they will then be perfect for the whole note. Whereas when you're listening to a singer perform live and perform with emotion, more often than not, they aren't bang on all the time. And that's exactly what we get here from Otis. But I'm sure everyone would agree they would much rather hear it like this, with that extra expression in 1 note, then the note just instantly coming out, perfect pitch, and just not going anywhere. I think the thing that stands out about this performance, but also Otis Redding as an artist in general, was his authenticity and his ability to communicate the emotional content of a song to an audience. And something that I want to throw in here as well is another quote, or something that Janis Joplin said, another standout performer at the Monterey Pop Festival, and I do have a video on that performance here somewhere, but her guitarist Sam Andrews said that Janis said after watching Otis Redding that she then learned how to push a song instead of just sliding over it. And it is interesting the way that she describes pushing a song, because for me, that definitely relates to pushing down on the diaphragm, where you get all of your power as a singer, just breathing in, having a supported breath, using that diaphragm in order to belt and sing at volume and sing with expression, sing in chest voice. And that is definitely something that you can say about Janis Joplin. She definitely sang with expression and she knew how to belt in chest voice. So just very quickly going through the guitar that we can hear in the background here, we've got our A major chord, and you're probably going to want to play this with all bar chords because there is a little hammer on with the second finger that comes in. So we've got this kind of sound. So you can hear the way that I'm hammering on that second finger. So to begin with, we go from what would be a minor and then hammer on to that major chord. And with the picking, you just want to make sure that you're counting in threes here, so you can count to 6 or 12, going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or count to 12 if you want to put it all into one bar. So at that point, we go down to an E major. You sometimes hear that little hammer on, exactly the same thing as happens on the A, happens on the E sometimes, and then we go back up to the A again. Oh no, then it's a build up. And now to the A again. Because now we're moving to a C sharp, and as you can see, I've kept that bar chord position because we still want the ability to hammer on that second finger. Like that, and then we go up 1 fret to the D, down to an F, and then back up to the A, down to an E, back to the A, and this is where we have this stab section where Otis just wants to repeat it. There is a key change that happens as well, but this just means that you're playing the chords 1 fret higher than you were initially. So from an A, just shift it up to an A sharp. Same technique with that. Hammer on with that second finger. Now down to an F instead of the E. It's exactly the same thing for all the other chords. So your C sharp now turns into a D. And now a D sharp. You might find it a little bit tight up here, so you have to keep your fingers a little bit organized, but that is pretty much it from a guitar perspective. I do want to cover a little bit of Otis's history and career in this video as well. He started out playing piano and guitar when he was young, and he sang in the church choir. He also sang in the school band and performed gospel songs on local radio, and he did that on a Sunday. He was hugely influenced by Little Richard, also by Sam Cooke, and he left school at the age of 15, and this was in order to help his family financially because his dad did suffer with illness, so it meant that his mum had to go out and work. It was in 1958 that Otis entered a talent competition at the age of 17, and he was being backed up by Johnny Jenkins on guitar. They managed to win this competition not just once, but 15 times in a row. So after this, Otis joined Johnny's band, and they were called Patty Cake and the Mighty Panthers. He was also hired by the Upsetters, as a huge influence of his, Little Richard, has moved on at this point to singing more gospel music and not so much of the rock and roll. So Otis was very well paid for filling this position, but he didn't stay there long. He toured the southern United States with Pat T. Cake and the Mighty Panthers, and they were playing at venues that were hospitable to African Americans because unfortunately the whole racial segregation thing was still happening at that time. And he did sign to Confederate Records, released a single. He was driving his mate Johnny down to the recording studio where Johnny was going to record, and it just so happened that Otis got on the mic as well, sang a couple of songs, and the studio chief, Jim Stewart, overheard him singing and liked the sound of Otis's voice. So Jim signed him in 1962, and Otis recorded These Arms of Mine, and that went on to sell over 800,000 copies, and it was a monster hit. In 1964, he released his debut album, which was called Pain in My Heart, and that got to number 20 in the R&B charts, also number 85 in the mainstream charts. He performed at the Apollo Theatre, where he was paid $400 per performance, and that's the equivalent of about $3,500 in today's money, so he was getting well paid, but unfortunately, the sheet music for the musicians cost $450, so $50 more than he was being paid. So I don't know how that worked out. Unfortunately, he was having financial difficulty because of this, and it was Ben E. King, who was headlining these shows at the time, who helped Otis out a little bit and gave him $100. In 1965, he released the great Otis Redding Sings Soul Ballads, and that same year, he released Otis Blue, Otis Redding Sings Soul. At this point, he was also performing at Whiskey A Go Go on the Sunset Strip in Los Angeles, and he was one of the first artists to perform for a mainstream crowd and a rock audience. And this was signified by the fact that Bob Dylan turned up in order to watch Otis perform, and in 1966 is when Otis released Try a Little Tenderness. Just a bit of information about Try a Little Tenderness, because it was a huge hit. It got to number 4 in the R&B charts, number 25 in the mainstream charts, so it was a crossover success. But the publishing company didn't want Otis to do a version of it because they didn't want it sung from a black perspective. So that really gives you an idea of the times. But it was a huge success, as was the album, released in that same year, 1966, and that had another long title. It was called Complete and Unbelievable, the Otis Redding Dictionary of Soul. And in 1967 followed a duets album with Carla Thomas, and that was called King and Queen, and that was a huge success as well. It got to number 5 in the mainstream charts and number 36 in the R&B charts, and all 3 singles from that album made it into the top 60 of the charts. That same year, he released Otis Redding live in Europe, and this is the year we're looking at here, 1967, where we can see he performed at the Monterey Pop Festival, and his whole set went down really well. It would turn out to be his last major concert. He also released Sweet Soul Music, and that was written with Arthur Conley. That got to number 2 in the mainstream charts, and at this time as well, he did have a surgical procedure in order to remove polyps from his larynx. It was in December of this year that he recorded Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, and this is interesting because the label didn't like it, his wife didn't like the melody either, and they also thought it might harm the reputation of the record label because it wasn't R&B enough. But Otis stuck to his guns and recorded it. He also threw in a little bit of an ad-libbed whistle at the end of the performance. So just a couple of days after recording the song in the studio, Otis and the Bar-Kays appeared on the Upbeat show, and this was in Cleveland, where they also played 3 concerts at a venue called Leo's Casino. The next day, they were due to fly out to Madison, Wisconsin, and unfortunately the weather was really bad. It was freezing conditions, as is always the case in Cleveland at that time of year. There was heavy rain and fog, and apparently from all reports they were warned that maybe it wasn't a good time to fly because of the adverse weather conditions. But they did take off in the plane, and the pilot radioed in 4 miles away from where they were about to land to ask for permission to land. But tragically, shortly after that radio transmission, the plane crashed. Sadly, Ben Carley from the Barkays was the only survivor of the crash. He was asleep during the flight, but just happened to wake up just before the crash happened, and he found himself grasping a cushion from one of the seats in order to stay afloat because they had crashed into a lake, and he didn't swim, so it meant that he couldn't help anybody else, unfortunately. And Otis's body was found the next day when they did search the lake. More than 4,500 people attended Otis's funeral, and Sitting on the Dock of the Bay was released the next month, so that was January in 1968. And that became the first ever posthumous #1. It sold over 1.4 million copies and was played on the air over 8 million times. And it was also the first ever posthumous album to reach #1 here in the UK. Interestingly, the Bee Gees had already written To Love Somebody for Otis. He was going to record that when he returned from his final concerts. It's great that we get to have a look back at Otis here, and we can see videos of him live and in full flow, someone that influenced and inspired so many future generations and artists around at the same time as well. It's something that, again, it's another artist who was taken so young, at only 26 years of age. But thankfully we do have these videos that we can look back at and see what a special artist and performer he was. But thank you guys so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!